Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatoria, and yes, I'm not in my usual surroundings, and that's because I'm on the move at the moment. I'm travelling, but the YouTube channel never sleeps, and I was going to say I don't ever sleep, but thankfully I do sometimes sleep, but I still keep making videos if I possibly can. As it happens, I've actually been at a HEMA event in York, and I've been looking around the area and seen lots of interesting things, some of which I'll be sharing with you on the YouTube channel and maybe on this video channel as well in coming days, weeks. But one question that came up recently when I showed this sword of mine, and you're thinking, why has he got a sword with him if he's travelling? Well, you know, who doesn't travel with swords? You'd be crazy not to, wouldn't you? Maybe you're crazy to travel with swords, I don't know, but nevertheless I do have some swords with me, and when I posted this, some of you eagle-eyed people out there noticed, just try and get the light to reflect correctly, hold on, there we go. There we go, at the base of the blade you can see just there below my finger there is something that many people ask about, which is commonly regarded as or seen as or recognised as a Star of David. And a lot of people say, is it a Jewish sword or is it some kind of, you know, some kind of connection to Israel or something like this. And in fact many, here's another example of a Wilkinson, many Wilkinson swords have it on, and in fact many swords, many British swords from the 19th century have this on. And what is it? Well, quite simply it is an interlocking bar which happens to be six-pointed. It's not strictly speaking a six-pointed star, although it is, I suppose, a related symbol. And as many of you will know, there are many symbols that have been used throughout history. Most famously the swastika, for example, has been used in many cultures to mean different things. It's been used in India, in ancient Greece, all over the place, in Norse culture and such like. And ultimately, if you actually think about it, if you're going to limit yourself to certain curves and straight lines and corners, there are literally only a certain number of simple symbols you can actually come up with. Obviously we've got squares and circles and triangles and rhombuses and parallelograms, these sort of things. But if you start to make it a little bit more complex, there's only a certain number of shapes you can come up with. Now, why do these swords have this symbol on? Well, it was Wilkinson's sword, there we go, it was Wilkinson's sword that first devised this, at the same time as that circle in there, which is actually a depression drilled in the blade, or milled, drilled, same thing really, drilled in the blade, and in the bottom of that depression is a brass disc, which is very often, in the case of Wilkinson's anyway, gilt, that is gold plated essentially. And that disc, let's just talk about that disc before we talk about the thing around it. That disc is what's known as the proof slug or proved disc, and very often that disc will say on it, not in the case of Wilkinson's but in the case of other makes, it will actually say proof or proved around the edge of it, and this is to show that the blade has been tested. There was a very specific test devised by Wilkinson that involved bending and striking the blade before the hilt was mounted, in some cases, bending and striking the blade to check that it was strong enough, and if it wasn't, certainly in the case of Wilkinson, they threw it away and made a new one, or got a new one and tested that one. And only the proven blades, only the proved blades, were actually passed and sold as swords. And in fact this wasn't something that Wilkinson invented. In actual fact what was known as warranted blades, or warranted never to fail, and these kind of slogans had been used since the 18th century. So in the Napoleonic period, very often the best quality swords from companies, at least in Britain, from companies like Osborne and Gill and Osborne and Gunby later, and Runkle, for example, which was a Solingen maker that exported a lot of blades to Britain and which were then hilted in Britain. These kind of top-notch companies, and Prosser as well, wrote warranted or warranted never to fail on the blade, and all Wilkinson were really doing was carrying on this tradition, but they instituted the proof disc, and the proof disc is what that disc in there is, which, as I said, is a drilled depression with a brass slug in the bottom, and that's to show really that the blade is of good quality and has been tested. Now, When Wilkinson brought that in, it was around 1844, 1845, officially in 1845, but we know that they started doing it a little bit before 1845. A lot of other companies realised they had to keep up with that, and so they copied it. Now, when Wilkinson brought in this proof disc, they also brought in this symbol around it, and that symbol is connected to the proof disc. What it represents is unbreakable strength, and it's a symbol, as far as we can tell, that Wilkinson took from Indo-Persian weapons. It's used on some particularly Islamic swords, and there's some suggestion it's related to Damascus steel, but it was a symbol that was used to represent strength and unbreakableness. So if you think about this in context, the proof disc which is being put in, you've tested the blade, you've gone, yes, it's an unbreakable blade, or under reasonable circumstances it's an unbreakable blade. We put the proof disc in and we etch, that is with acid, around that circle to show this unbreakable six-pointed star or a bar, to show that it's this extra good quality. So to answer the question, it's very simple. The six-pointed star shown on lots of Wilkinson swords and some other makes of sword there always surrounds that brass proof disc and is a symbol of strength and unbreakableness, at least in theory, if not always in practice. I hope that answers the question. Cheers, folks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on Facebook. You can buy t-shirts through Spreadshirt, support us on Patreon, or follow us on Pinterest. Thank you.